I'm Yann Martel, the author of Life of Pi, The High Mountains of Portugal, and Self, and I'm delighted to be a judge for the next big story from the Novelry. Written stories are rooted in words. What's wonderful about language is it's an instrument that you don't need to master to use. Everyone can play language, in that it's not like a musical instrument. We have expectations of proficiency with musical instruments. If someone said to you, I'm a singer-songwriter and I play the guitar and I play the piano, and they picked up their guitar or sat at their piano and they started playing one of their songs and they were terrible players, making incessant mistakes, it might initially be kind of interesting. We're not used to this idea of someone claiming to play the piano and playing very poorly, but it might have an initial appeal, but eventually we get tired of the poor playing. There's an expectation of a degree of proficiency with musical instruments. What's interesting about language is that it's inherent to who we are. Being able to deliver a story has nothing to do with good grammar and good syntax and having been to Oxford. It all has to do with story and authenticity. So it is definitely the case that you have writers who tell great stories who aren't good spellers, who perhaps aren't even good writers, but they have a sense of story. And there's also now the question, the funny one, of authenticity. Sometimes a story is great not because of the big words and all that, but just because of the authenticity of the story. So, it's an obvious one, for example, a Holocaust survivor, someone who's overcome a traumatic event with which you are sympathetic. They deliver that story pretty well any which way, and there's something about it that draws you in. So there's something, that intangible thing called authenticity, that sense of life truth that will come through no matter if you're good at your grammar, good at your spelling. Prose isn't about big words, fancy sentences with, 24 subordinate clauses. Prose is about communicating your story, communicating that heartbeat in you that you want to transmit to the other. And language, any language at any level of proficiency can communicate that. A simple example, a baby cries. It's communicating a story. It's communicating want. I want my mommy. I want my daddy. That sound communicates an emotion. That's what stories are about. How charming is it when your little kid who's 5 years old writes a sentence? The spelling is atrocious. It's totally phonetic. The syntax is terrible. It's absolutely adorable. It's, once again, communicating because there's an authenticity there. So prose is not about writing like Proust or like Shakespeare. It is about the heartbeat behind that. Finding your natural writing voice, at least to start with, is usually just your own voice. I'd say everyone has one story to tell at least, which is usually the story of their own lives. So there, the authenticity is just being true to yourself. Any number of immigrant stories, any number of coming-of-age stories, any number of coming out of the closet stories are about relaying what happened to you, how you came to be who you are. So that story, the voice comes from being true to yourself. Then the trick is that second, third, fourth, fifth book, where you're leaving the biographical, the autobiographical behind. There's nothing wrong with the biographical or the autobiographical, but unless you've had an extraordinarily eventful life, you want to get beyond that. Start, first of all, by telling your first story well, and then you'll realize that it's kind of like, to contradict what I said earlier, it is kind of like a musical instrument. Once you sort of know how to strum a story on your guitar, it does get easier to tell a second and a third story. But so start with what's close to home, as they always say, with what you know. And then soon enough, you'll be able to start doing what you don't know, because you're going to start exploring, you're going to start doing research, you're going to start thinking through language and through story, and then it'll start coming. But to start with, I would say stick to the voice that is closest to you, and that means the one that is the most emotionally true to you. Should you use AI to improve your writing style? I'd say no, because all AI is the aggregate of what everyone else has done. So if you use AI, that's the fastest way to write conventionally. It's unlikely that you use AI that it's going to recommend that you string together 7 adjectives in a row, that you have a sentence that's 3 pages long, or a sentence that's only 3 words long and 10 of those in a row. A great art is about breaking the rules, but breaking them intelligently. I suspect AI can't do that. The other thing, too, is why would you want to use AI? The very point of writing, I presume, certainly for me, is enjoying language itself. So why would you want someone else to do it for you? In a sense, AI is just another ghostwriter. I guess you use a ghostwriter if you don't like writing. But if you don't like writing, at one point you shouldn't be a writer. Normally you are a writer because you enjoy writing, including making mistakes, because those, in fact, at one point, those mistakes are not mistakes. They're just who you are. That's your style. I would recommend don't use AI. It's the very involvement of the muck of language that will ultimately yield something that is truly you. Do I have any tips for writing good, clean prose? Yes. Rewrite it 40 times. Like, for example, I would generally say beware of adverbs. Adverbs, he spoke loudly. She said shyly. Those Lee words signal often too much to the reader. You're starting to tell the reader how to feel, and the reader doesn't like that. The reader wants to discover for himself, for herself, how to feel. So beware of adverbs. Be sparse with the adjectives. Nouns and verbs are pretty good. Punctuation is really cool. It's like the brake and the accelerator in your car. A full stop is like braking. A comma is like accelerating and slowing down. Play with that. And we will all do this as writers. We will say, oh, I'm a genius. I just wrote a sentence that's like 3/4 of a page, and you just love it, and it's central to your story. Then your first reader says, I got lost in it. I couldn't follow it. And then you have to make the decision whether you follow that editorial advice or you ignore it. You may cut that sentence in half. Eventually, you may just delete the sentence. You're totally embarrassed about it. It's playing in language that will make you more proficient. And it's not about clean necessarily. It's about effective. You want that short or that long sentence to deliver something. And you'll discover how to do it yourself by just experimenting. Trying a short sentence, trying a long sentence, trying big long words, trying obscure words, trying really plain words. It just has to work. So as I said, language is an instrument that anyone can play. You just have to have that sense of a story, of something you want to communicate. And that will communicate itself whether you, as I said, you speak the Queen's English.